That is the sound of another successful sound cue at the beginning of the Rec Poker podcast. And if you hear my voice, you know it's a forums edition. My name's Jim Reed, Bluffsterini in the home game. And if you want to learn about me and the other members of the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew. I want to thank Running Aces, Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and of course, website AMP for making all our dreams come true. And I'm just one man on a team. That team has many members. Some of those members are here tonight. Gang, why don't you tell a little bit about yourselves to Rec Poker Nation? Introduce yourself.
I'm John Somsky, and I'm also known as Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I'm Fergie56 in the home game and Pat Vet everywhere else.
And we're here tonight. It's Monday night. We're playing against each other in the Rec Poker home games, trying to steal each other's chips just like we do every week. And just like every week, we are going to take a forum post from the Rec Poker forums and talk about it here on the show. So this week, we're going to take a look at a post by MonkieSystem, Keith Brandt, who is a great prolific poster in the Rec Poker forums. We talk about Keith's stuff all the time. Keith's a great guest in our member events as well. He's always sharing his knowledge with solvers. He's really good at breaking hands down. And in this case, he's talking about how to exploit a faulty 3-betting range at 40 big blinds. So this question comes out of a Learn Pro Poker study group that we were running. So every Saturday at noon Central, we run a study group at Rec Poker on a different subject material every week. One's on a Learn Pro Poker training video, one's on the monthly seminar, one's on the monthly focus, and one's just a group coaching session that I run looking at Poker Tracker 4. This one was looking at a Learn Pro Poker video where Ryan LaPlante was going through responses to 3-bets. So it was a lot of examples with a 40 big blind effective stack where we would make an open to 2 or 2.5x, and we would be 3-bet. And we would have to think about how to respond, what does our range look like, and a number of other questions like that. So Keith's question at first is really just, how do we exploit improper 3-bets in our opponents? And I think he was talking about it in the context of people that over 3-bet, but I think people that under 3-bet can also be exploited. So first, just very generally, is that something that you guys think is important? Is there a way you like to think about that question or that topic?
I think it is an important topic. I mean, just being able to exploit your opponents whenever they make mistakes is an important thing. I've always struggled trying to exploit 3-betters, not knowing what to do, because there's two basic choices. So you can either so if they're 3-betting too often, if they're 3-betting too little, it's fairly simple. You just fold.
Yeah.
Because they just aren't doing it with wide enough range, and they have too much strength in their range that in general, unless you are very strong, you just don't play.
Or I guess if you're deep stacked enough, you can play with a speculative hand that'll bust them. But yes,
right. Although with a 40 big blind stack, you're not going to be deep enough for that.
And folding is an exploit in itself. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But for the other ones, you have two choices, which is either to flat them or to raise them. And I struggle how to do that effectively, because raising them, I think it can often be the more effective item. But if you're sitting on 40 big blinds, you're putting a lot of your chips at risk. And so I've struggled with what the optimal way to do that is.
Yeah, Kim, did you have something on that? I know we're getting some lag.
No.
Okay. Yeah, that's another big thing where for me as well, it's like one thing to identify a leak, but then it's difficult to think, okay, so what are we actually going to do about this? I thought one thing we could do was sort of look at a couple scenarios where if we're opening in late position, what a range might look like in that way, and then what are the factors that we're going to be considering. So in my case, stack size is obviously super important. So having that nailed down at 40 big blinds helps. And then I always think about it's one thing to know that they're three betting too widely, but another question is, how do they respond to four bets? And I think you kind of have to know that in order to feel really confident about your own strategy playing back at them. If they're the kind of person that's going to three bet widely and call a lot of four bets, then you're going to have a different exploit in mind for them than if they're the kind of player that three bets widely but folds to a lot of four bets. And you could make more exploitatively wide four bets with like ace blockers, king blockers, and stuff like that you don't actually expect to have to play. Again, they're going to be mostly shoves in this case at 40 big blinds, but not exclusively, I suppose. So position, I think, has a big part in that. You might even call if you're going to be in position with certain kinds of hands. Kim, are there like certain types of hands or ranges that you think of in that spot?
At 40 big blinds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at the premiums, obviously. And I guess it depends if you're in position or out of position, but in general, you're looking at your jacks and up and your ace king and up. And then I think you're just sort of splitting on some of the other hands that would have blockers in, like a ace, maybe ace nine to ace queen, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I think it depends on position as well. I think you can three bet a little wider from the blinds because you don't have as many people to act after you. And also your three bet's going to be larger. So then it will be if you're three betting in position. So if you have a middle position opener and the button's going to three bet you less than the blinds will have to three bet you larger. So that changes all of the hand strengths as well, I think, to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we can go into specifics if we have a specific spot we want to look at. But I think when you're talking about four bets, you're at 40 big blinds deep. You're rarely going to be four bet without having an all-in scenario.
Yeah, great point.
So, I mean, when say you have a raise from 2.2 from a middle position and you're in the blinds, you're going to raise to probably 8 at least as a three bet. And now you're looking at stacks going in. So it's either an 8 and you're folding or you're an 8 and getting it in. So like a four bet is getting it in.
Yeah, I think that's right. And is there a certain, I know, for some of our listeners, they haven't looked at exactly how stacks break down sort of all the way up to 100, but do you have a stack size in mind where you start having a four betting range that's not all in?
I would say over 50 big blinds you'd have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's that old adage, you don't want to be putting a quarter of your stack in unless you're going to put the rest of it in. There's all these sort of general rules about poker. I'm not sure how
that's an old adage.
I know, that's what I said.
I think now it's more like a third.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
We're getting much cheekier about our sizing as poker evolves. We're finding these little ways to smooth those edges a little. So
Jim, you had mentioned using a different strategy for people who would tend to overcall when they get three bet on them. So what is the strategy you would use in that case?
Thanks, John.
Do you mean overcall the? Do you mean overcall the three bet, or do you mean they call too much?
They call too much.
Okay.
Yes, good point. Good point. Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure what you meant, but okay, so they call too much. So if I know that a player calls too much, I will exploit that with my good hands by three betting my stronger hands with a bit higher sizing. When I know when I know I have a player that's going to call too much. So, and I'm doing that for value.
Yeah, so you're going to do that with like a top-down linear range,
right?
That's probably involves some thinner value hands at the bottom of it, than your polarized range would, but without the bluffs, I guess, essentially, or with
Well,
fewer bluffs, relatively.
Yeah, I'll still have 3-bet bluffs, but I'll have them offset with some of the, like maybe ace queen plus sort of one that I'm willing to throw away as a 3-bet bluff. I won't bluff as much 3-bet against a calling station, which I think that's just a natural tendency. Just don't bluff as much, just call. Just call and realize the equity of your hand.
Yeah, I think that probably applies to 4-bets too. Where if we're in the situation where we think they're going to be calling 4-bets at a higher frequency than they should, we should really be choosing value hands for that range and not bluffs as much, because they're not going to fold often enough to make those bluffs profitable. And so then I think you just really have to think about, where are you going to draw that line? Where does your 4-bet become a call this 3-bet? And for me, I'm going to be much more likely to call that 3-bet when I'm in position, and to make that lighter 4-bet shove when I'm out of position. And that's,
and when are you going to fold? Like, you have to have some folds in there as well.
Yes, great point.
Right?
Great. Wait, are you sure about that, Kim? Do I? Do I? No, of course, that's right. And I think that's another thing, anticipation. So this is another thing, like we talk about ways to respond to 3-bets. And one of those ways is if you have a bunch of players to your left that are 3-betting a lot, just don't open some hands that are going to put you in difficult positions facing a 3-bet. So you can anticipate that a little by just changing your range preemptively.
Right. One of the things that I've noticed, and what Keith says, is like more people are 3-betting and they're not using the correct sizing. So you're getting the right odds to call with any 2 cards that you opened with. Yeah, when the 3-bet sizing is, when you raise to 2 and the 3-bet sizing is 4, it's like you're going to call with your 9 deuce suited. Like, you're just going to call.
Yeah, and that's one thing.
Or you can 4-bet. I mean,
right.
It opens
but you're getting such a good
too.
Price to call. Yeah, but as you say, you're getting such a good price to call. They're not really putting you to a real decision with that.
No, and you should just never be folding.
Right.
Ever.
Well, let's hear what Jonathan Little has to say, and then I want to get into this notion of how your sizing and your range actually have a lot to do with each other.
Have you ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead?
He's reading our minds.
What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it, or do you just call?
He's in our heads.
What do you do with ace-king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
And if I hear that anyone has been guessing or stressing, I am going to tell Jonathan, and he is going to write a very angry letter to you. So don't do that. Go to pokercoaching.com/recpoker and take advantage of his money back guarantee. Please do go check it out. So Jonathan Little would be one person that would tell you, if you're going to 3-bet, if you're going to choose to have a 3-betting range, you should have a reason to do that. And typically you should choose a size that's going to accomplish that goal. And, Kim's getting at this point where people are 3-betting more because they're kind of catching on that C-betting was very popular. And then everyone started C-betting. People are catching on that 3-betting is also kind of a very profitable spot. So they're 3-betting more. But most people aren't doing it with an appropriate range or to an appropriate size. So, I mean, first of all, do you have any rules, Kim, about sizing when it comes to 3-bets? Is it like a certain number of times the bet size or something like that, just as a entryway, as a default?
Well, I guess at 40 big blinds, I'd be doing 3 times the bet sizes as default. So
is that in position or out of position, or
in position?
Yeah.
Out of position, I would make it at least probably 4.
Yeah, that's the way I think about it too.
Yeah, or even 4.5. Yeah.
And that's going to be really player dependent too, right? And it's one of these spots where if you know, and so when you're responding to that in 4-bets, it's kind of like we were talking about before. If someone's giving you if you open to 2.5 and someone clicks it back to, what would that be? 4. That's really not, it's a pretty trivial decision that you're going to continue. Like Kim said earlier, as long as you don't fold, you're really not doing anything wrong. And we want to give people an opportunity to fold when we make these 3 bets and when we make these 4 bets. So you have to do it to a size that at least makes them consider doing it with some of their worst hands. And if you don't want them to fold because you've got pocket aces and you're worried they're going to do that, just don't put it in that range if that's what you're worried about. At 40 big blinds, it's not like you need to 3-bet pre-flop in order to get the bottom chip in. But I still think you're going to be better off just including all your value hands in that range for the most part.
And when you do see that, I've seen that a player will just click it back with pocket aces.
Mm-hmm.
And you really shouldn't be folding most hands to that. But you should be aware that there could be a higher amount of aces in that range versus other hands. And just have that in the back of your mind. So when you're looking at, you shouldn't probably be getting it all in just because you hit a pair there.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of this comes down to player types too, right? Like what's happened is this player has chosen not to add a bunch of fold equity to this action is essentially what's happened. They've chosen not to add fold equity. So you have to think, is it because they don't understand how important fold equity is? Or is it because their hand is so strong they don't need to add fold equity to it? So if you can make some assumptions about the player too, that might help you hand range in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I like that. And then when we're talking about spots where we can 4-bet, so here's a spot we've opened and another player has 3-bet us, and we think that they are the kind of player who 3-bets with a range that has a bunch of hands that they're going to fold to 4-bets. So this isn't that player before that called a bunch of 4-bets. This is a different player. What are the kind of hands that we want to mix in with our value hands to make our life to be the most profitable bluffs or semi bluffs in that 4-betting range? So we're still going to be 4-betting all our strongest hands. How do we choose which ones to include that have the right ace blockers or the right king blockers or the right equity when called? I know we probably want to include hands like ace 5 suited as an example in that kind of a range, but Kim and John, do you have is there other qualities of the hand that you look for in that spot?
I have it at Floptimal up if you want to know what that says.
Oh yeah, perfect. I love Floptimal. Yeah, hit us.
So for you 4-bet all in with ace 4 suited, half your ace 5 suited, half your ace 3 suited, ace king offsuit, and most of your queens, jacks, and 10s. And you would just raise with your other queens, your kings, your ace king suited, your aces, and half of your ace queen suited.
So it's really still, it's ace queen, other than the ace 5, ace 3, ace 4, ace queen sounds like the lowest unpaired hand. Is that right? So that is a pretty strong range. Yeah.
Ace queen. No, not ace queen. There's no, for raising. That's for raising.
Oh, sorry. Right.
So for all in, you're going with the ace 3 suited, ace 4 suited, ace 5 suited, and then 10s, jacks, queens, and ace king off.
So that's actually a pretty good chunk of those. So that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And so folks that are listening behind at home, basically it's a bunch of value hands, those high pairs and ace king. And then we're sneaking in some of these wheel aces, these suited wheel aces, ace 5, ace 4, ace 3. And the reason we choose these hands is because they've got an ace in them, which blocks the likelihood of our opponent having one of the strongest hands. It has the ability to make a wheel straight, and it has the ability to make the nut flush. So even though we're not going to have a lot of playability because we're shoving with these, we still have a lot of ways to interact with a lot of different runouts, because really what we're looking to do is realize our equity over 5 cards when we shove pre-flop. So
there's a caveat to that. That is the caveat that's the hijack raising to 2.2 and the button raising to about 5.5.
Ah,
No, and because when you get a big blind raising to more like 8, now you've only got shoves and calls and folds.
okay. Because the pot's bigger,
Yeah,
even though we're in position. So are there any calls, or are there just there's no
there's
raises?
calls.
There's just
There's
no
no
raises.
raises. Yeah.
Ah, because the pot's bigger. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense. And so it's taken some of the hands that were raises from out of position,
Right.
and or in the other spot, and now they're calls or shoves.
Yeah, I'm happy to share the screen if you want to.
Oh, sure, yeah, that'd
you
be
want me
fun. And our video
share the
members,
screen.
yeah,
I
let me know.
cannot screen sharing.
Oh, you cannot. Here, let me get in there, and let me see. Where's this here? You should be able to share now. And I know a lot of our listeners are listening to the podcast over their Spotify or SoundCloud or Apple or something like that. We do release a video version of all of these on YouTube. So I'd love for people to go over to YouTube, find the Rec Poker community, and watch along there. You can see, we try and share screen from sometimes. So this is Floptimal, Kim, that we're looking at here.
Yeah. So this is looking at a hijack open at 40 big blinds. And when we so hijack, this is our raising range, this entire range, the green, and we're raising to 2.2. So when the button raises us, this is the button's 3-bet range.
And the different colors refer to different sizes.
The button, sorry, button.
Right.
Why is that on the small blind? Hang on. Hijack, raise, button. This is the button's raising range here to 5.5 big blinds.
Yes.
So you can see it's pretty mixed, but it's pretty it's heavily on the suited aces, suited kings, pairs, and ace 10 and up. There's a mix there, but it doesn't look like we're ever just calling. Now, in game, I might, if I had a shoving stack in the blinds, I might just call with aces or kings in this spot, allowing the small blind or big blind to shove. So, but this is just sort of a scenario where everybody's 40 big blinds effective.
Awesome.
Right.
I love the way you've introduced Floptimal stuff into here. Yeah, go ahead.
So now we can look at the button raises, and now we look at the hijack's reaction to the button raise. So we can see that the yellow is an all-in. So he's doing some all-ins, and these are our bluff all-ins down here. These small suited aces. We have a lot of calling. We have a pretty wide calling range, and we have a relatively small raising range. 11% raising range, 7% shoving range, 68% calling range, and a 14% folding range. So we're not folding very much. We're just folding some of our offsuit hands, our lowest offsuit hands.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how they've mixed the raising range as well between the ultra premium hands and some of those offsuit ace Broadway blocker kind of hands as well. So it's very intuitive to look at this and to see, oh, okay, I'm folding these ones here. That makes sense. You know, I can see how they've mixed it in there. I can see why this is such a helpful tool.
Right. So if we clear these actions and we make the hijack raise again, now we go to the button reaction and we make the button raise with now we look at because the button raised to the big blind, raised to 8.3. And you can see that range of the big blind. The raising range of the big blind is very heavily weighted towards value. That we can see now that hijack doesn't have any raises. We just have shoves and calls. And now we're folding 41%.
And how cool is that? Like some of the hands that they've chosen here to turn into a shove like king jack suited, for instance, I see is the shove at a very high frequency, but
Yeah.
king queen suited is a call, and king 10 suited is a call, and king 9 suited is a call, and like it's just sitting there like this island. King jack suited and queen jack suited become these preferences for shoves. Is it clear to you why that is? Just they've got they're not
Yes,
dominated
because
as
we can
often?
make well, we can make aces fold with those hands. We
Mhm.
can make some aces fold.
Mhm.
And we're some of the better aces to fold, some of the better, and we can also make king queen offsuit fold.
Yep.
We may even make king queen suited fold.
And I think that's a part of not everyone thinks about that when they choose hands to shove with. Part of the question should be like, will a better hand fold to this? Because otherwise you're just sort of allowing your opponents to play perfectly.
So, and like, so that you can see that they're never shoving aces here.
Mhm.
We're never shoving aces or kings.
Mhm.
Right? We're just calling. We're just going to let our opponent hang themselves here.
Right. But we're always shoving ace king, whether it's suited or offsuit.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
it's the only hand that we're shoving 100% of the time here, it looks like. So it's interestingly queens at a very high frequency, but not 100%. And then a lot of these other ones are still kind of a mix.
About half and half with the jacks and tens. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so I guess I'm always interested in how these ranges are put together. I guess when you don't shove, your opponent can say, if you're playing by this range, when you call, they can say they don't have ace king, would be the only like leveling war exploit that you could develop against this.
Right.
But I think you get so much value out of having it in your shoving range anyway, that that's the trade-off that you make, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So they don't have ace king, but they have a lot of other aces and they have a lot of other kings. when they
Right.
call. So
Yeah,
you know.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. All right, I'm going to, oops, I took off the wrong thing. Sorry, Kim, hold on.
It's all right. I stopped the share.
No, that's good. That was me. Bring your video back anytime. I accidentally canceled it. There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, I guess, John, do you have any more thoughts on 3-bet ranges or 4-bet ranges, or how to exploit them, or things to consider?
Just that there's a lot I need to learn still.
Yeah, it's funny, when we talked about doing this episode, we said, oh, this will be a pretty quick one. We'll just talk about the basic concepts of 3-betting and 4-betting. Here we are. It's at least another half-hour episode. We do try and make these forums ones kind of pop in and out, but what can you do? We love talking about poker, folks.
I know it's not going to be as easy if people are listening to this on the iTunes app as a podcast as it is when you're visually watching it, when we're looking at those. So I don't like to use those as much in these, but
this was a good one.
It was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a good subject for it. All right. Well, then I guess I would just like to thank John Somsky and Kim Kilroy. I want to thank Kevin for joining us in the chat here. Of course, website AMP, Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Steve Fredland, thank you all so much. See you again soon.